Today we're going to learn how to put a floating gusset into boxer briefs, leggings, you name it, you can do it. This is great for people who wear cloth pads and the wings tend to rub on their thighs. This is a nice way to make also wearing a pad disposable or reusable very discreet because you won't see the wings on the outside. I do this to all of my boxer briefs. I love boxer briefs. I live in them. I do this to all of mine, and this is my favorite way to add a gusset so I can wear cloth pads with my boxer briefs. Supplies you will need are boxer briefs. If they fit you fairly tight, that is important for cloth pads. We have floating gusset patterns in our Facebook groups if you need a pattern or go free to wing it and try it yourself. I'm using 2 strips of cotton lycra. I'm using scraps. Cotton lycra is my favorite, it's the softest. A washable marker will be your best friend. Scissors, pinking shears are also handy if you have those. And a measuring tape if you would like to adjust where your gusset is on your underwear. So first, on the back side of one of my pieces of fabric, I'm going to trace my pattern. Make sure you have enough fabric around it for seam allowance. So if you notice, my pattern is not right on the edge. It's just a little bit of ways away. Washable markers are fantastic. On the pattern, we'll have a turn hole. This is one of my original ones, so it doesn't have that, so I'm just going to draw it here on the flat side. So this is where we will not be sewing it together. And you don't have to trace it on your other piece, but you are going to put the correct sides facing together. And you're going to pin them. Make sure you have seam allowance around both sides, and I'm using scraps, so I'm making my job a little bit harder than what it would need to be if I'm using a regular piece. So I'm just fiddling around and matching it up. Use as many or as little pins as you like. Normally I only do 2, but because I'm using one that likes to roll on the edge, I'm using 1 in each corner, so I'm using 4 pins. Alright, now we're going to use a straight stitch, and we're going to start at one side of that turn hole, and we're going to sew all the way around to the other side of the turn hole. I'm not using a walking foot on my machine, so you can see how I have to stop and adjust my fabric and pivot. Cotton lycra likes to shift around and stretch a little bit, so it takes as many stops as you need to make sure your fabric is laying flat and it's not getting all bunched up. Make sure you lock in your stitches at the beginning and the end. Don't ever sew over pins. Make sure you pull them out if they're in your way. I pin on the inside so they're far enough away I didn't have to pull them. Now I pull them. Now here's where pinking shears or scissors come in. Trim around, leaving about 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can do this with regular scissors. If you do it with regular, make sure you snip into your corners. Now we're going to flip it. Turn it all the way inside out, so both fabrics should be facing the correct way now. I'm using my magic wand. You can also use a chopstick or a paintbrush handle, anything like that. These will be in our fundraising auction in November if you want to score one. This is what it looks like. Push in your turn hole, so that's laying flush. You can throw a pin or a clip in there to keep that closed if you want. Clean up my mess. Grab our underwear. Now we're going to figure out where we want the floating gusset to be. If you want this more customized, you can put on your underwear first and mark where you want the front of your pad to be. And that is the best way. I like mine a little bit further forward. I need more coverage in the front, and then I do the back, so I adjust mine a little bit so it will not be centered in the underwear. With the existing crotch, I'm going to shift it a little bit further forward for my personal needs, but that's what's so great about this is they're totally customizable to whatever you need. So you see me marking my center seam in the back with that washable marker. That's a great way to do it. You can also eyeball it if it has a back seam or use that label. So I'm just throwing a pin in the front, and I am flipping it around to where it follows the natural curve of how a body will lay because its bodies aren't flat. I'm going to throw a pin in the back, make sure it's lined up in the middle. That's why I drew that little line there. That washes right out, so don't worry about that. Now you're only going to sew the front and the back of this. You are not going to sew around the whole thing. You can top stitch your floating gusset down the sides if you want it. It's not necessary, but you totally can if you want to. I like to use a 3-step zigzag for this. You can use a wavy or a regular zigzag. A straight stitch will not hold up as well as something that has a little bit more coverage, like a zigzag or a 3-step zigzag. Again, make sure you lock in your stitches at the beginning and the end. And lift your foot and pivot, adjust as needed. Make sure your fabric is laying flat underneath of your underwear as well. Work in little sections. It's hard working with curved underwear, but you'll get it. Just work in that little section that you're working in at the time, and then adjust as needed. Lock in your stitches. I'm gonna go around one corner, around the front, and then around the other corner. You can match your colored threads too to underwear if you want them to be fairly invisible. I kind of use gray for everything. It was kind of a quilter's hack that I learned a long time ago. Gray matches everything. So there you go. It's floating in the middle. Nothing is attached, just at the ends and around the corners. So here we go, showing how cloth pads work. So it only goes around the liner. Underwear lays inside your underwear. It doesn't bunch up your legs. You can't even tell there's a pad in there. So enjoy. Hopefully this will help you out. You can do this to leggings, even regular underwear. It's fantastic. Hopefully this helped you out. Feel free to use our patterns as needed. We're here if you have any questions.